Since its foundation in 1913, Valzug has been committed to building a sustainable future through the manufacturing of long-lasting kitchen and textile care appliances and responsible carbon-neutral production. It means the Swiss firm is well-placed to tackle the topic of timelessness in design. And that's exactly what it will do across 3 special episodes of Monocle on Design. Recorded at Milan Design Week and premiering on Wednesday, 15th of May, we'll hear from a panel of designers including David Tulstrup, Lisa Demetrius and Rike Frost.
It's always with the human person and the human being in focus. So if I do something that's in harmony and balance for people, then I believe that it will last longer.
So tune in for some essential discussion on ensuring quality and longevity are imbued in our homes and workplace with Valzug.
This is Monocle on Design, a show where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and fashion. I'm Nick Manise. On today's program, we hear about the new showcase taking place in Aram's London HQ. We also meet Design Miami's Jessie Lee and head to Copenhagen, where one exhibition examines the relationship between architecture and the senses. All that and more coming up on Monocle on Design. Design Miami debuts a new exhibition in Los Angeles this week. Founded in Florida in 2005, the collectible design and furniture fair has grown in recent years, with showcases in Paris, Basel and Shanghai, as well as its hometown of Miami. Last year, it was acquired by Basic Space. Headquartered in LA and founded by Jessie Lee, Basic Space is a platform selling high-end, limited edition fashion, furniture and more. Monocle's US editor, Chris Lord, caught up with Jessie to find out what we can expect from Design Miami this year.
The simplest way to describe Basic Space, it's a curated marketplace. From the beginning, we sold pre-owned vintage and new, right? It's a mix of fashion, design, art. We even did NFTs, right? So I wanted to build a platform where, it's more authentic, curated, but, more importantly, let my friends sell things directly to their fans, and then they cross-pollinate, because if you come to Basic Space to discover one person, you might find somebody else that you like, and then you can build that relationship, over time.
The late, great fashion designer Virgil Abloh used Basic Space as the place to debut the collection he did with Vitra. And I wonder if that was a key moment for you when you thought, because that was very successful on Basic Space, was that a moment for you where you thought, there is a space amongst the people who are using my site for, frankly, high-end collectible design?
Virgil had already designed everything and Vitra had manufactured everything. We became the last piece of on the distribution side. I guess it kind of reminded us that design, was going to become bigger, right? And at the time, I think for a lot of fans that were buying stuff just, fashion related or followers of Virgil, maybe design was still new to them. But since then, it's been 3 years. Right now, design is only bigger and bigger since COVID. And I see more and more millennial and Gen Z, right, spending their hard-earned money on things that are design.
At what point did you start to think, I want to buy Design Miami? What was that moment that you started to realize this is where the future lies?
A couple of our investors are also involved with Craig Robbins, who's the co-founder of Design Miami, and obviously the developer, behind Miami Design District. And Craig had been an early investor in Basic Space. So we all knew each other very well. Design, in my opinion, is the next big thing. Fashion and art are very mainstream in some ways. And I was part of, especially on the fashion side. Design is still very nascent, right? It's still a very niche thing. And I think we're just at the early stage, right? We're nowhere near the inflection point. So I felt like between Design Miami being the preeminent, right, of the fair within design, and Basic Space bringing potential new collectors and the commercial opportunity to be a great complementary piece, felt like was the right timing. And that's how it came to be.
The customers, the people who buy from Basic Space, do you see them as the same kind of customer who will go and drop $15,000 on a piece of Brazilian modernism, for example?
I think a lot of them don't know that they are yet. So that's part of our job to educate and show that not only like if you're going to spend, because I have friends, let's say, that spend way more than that on cars, watches, and used to, flip sneakers and fashion items, So the price range is not the problem. It's just that a lot of them are still not exposed to the world of design. And once you do, and you know that you can live with it, provenance might matter, and then it actually accrues in value. So it's also an investment vehicle. Then I think that's when it's going to flip the switch for a lot of basic space, users, On the flip side, I think for the current, the design community, they also have an opportunity to expand the market through new collectors coming in, And that's part of our job, both on Design Miami and Basic Space, to kind of create that intersection.
Design Miami, in a way, much like Art Basel, has become a brand in itself. And now you have Design Miami, obviously in Miami, but also one happened in Paris last year. You've done outposts in Basel as well. And of course, this year in May, the first time you're going to bring it here where we are to Los Angeles. LA's design scene is an interesting time. I think it's probably about where the art galleries were about 10 years ago. You have a handful of very good design galleries here. You have lots of designers who live here. But in a way, the scene is still quite fragmented compared to something like New York. I wonder what this fair can do for that design scene as it opens a new outpost here in May this year.
Yeah, I think our number one objective, is to both introduce design to, new collectors and create, I think, more of a moment, in time where design is celebrated. There are, a lot of people with money that can spend. There are beautiful homes here, and LA really expands. And I would even argue that Design Miami LA, a lot of our collectors are going to come down from San Francisco and Silicon Valley, At a fair in Miami or Paris or Basel, they might, have their interior designers or decorators fly there to, look at things and purchase. But in LA, obviously different celebrities and VIPs can come straight from their homes in Beverly Hills, Malibu, Bel Air, whatever. Geographically, I think we have a ton of, both existing and new collectors in California, and we want to be the hub for that.
Obviously, design is a different sphere from art, but while things are not dire, there are some headwinds. Top end of the market is struggling compared to last year. There are slowing sales here in the US, 10% drop last year in the US market for art, even if that is still the world's biggest market for buying and selling art right now. I just wonder if now is the right time to be adding another fair to an already very crowded calendar globally.
I think both art and luxury fashion, might be going through a similar situation, Now, one can look at that and go, to your point, is this the right time to bring design into both a crowded and perhaps a flat industry or whatever you want to call it, on the higher end of spending? But we see it as an opportunity to actually then bring something new to the table or to the pick table, pun intended, to the market. Because again, for my friends and I, even just to be very, blunt and anecdotally speaking, the spending behavior of the last couple of years has shifted. So the things that we care more about and people that I think are true tastemakers and trendsetters, within, let's say, broader millennial demographic, it's all about now, vintage cars, vintage watches, vintage sofas, but then also mixing with the right contemporary things, as you noted. And that's already been happening with fashion, And so with design, to me, it's just rather than following art or being the next after fashion, I think it's just about introducing it as a whole new category, And again, as I'm sure you know well, it's scarcity creates demand, and demand with higher demand, price goes up. And if all that happens, it's a win-win for the design community, So part of Design Miami, our role is to make sure our galleries, do well. The designers do well. And then most importantly, we introduce new, design to a new crowd of people, So I think this is actually, if anything, the perfect chance to do that.
That was Jessie Lee in conversation with Monocle's Chris Lord. Design Miami LA's 2024 edition will run from the 16th until the 20th of May. Architectural retrospectives can often be a little dry. a chronological run-through of his studio's beginnings, the founder's portraits, its key buildings, plus a few nice photographs and models. The Danish Architecture Centre in Copenhagen is taking a different approach to its new showcase. Called Aware, it celebrates the work of 3XN. Founded in 1986 in Aarhus by three men, all called Nielsen, hence the 3XN moniker, the design and architecture studio is behind landmark buildings including the International Olympic Committee's HQ in Lausanne and the Fish Market in Sydney. Monocle's Michael Booth went along to the Danish Architecture Centre in Copenhagen to meet with the head of programming, Kasper Riesholt.
What we wanted to do is actually to give a new experience, but a more one-to-one experience of architecture. Most times we have models of the exterior and then visualizations of the interior of buildings. Here we have tried to make an exhibition where it's one-to-one to focus on what does the room, shape, color, material, how does it affect us as a visitor, as a user of the rooms. I actually don't know the English term, but in Danish we call it rumkunst.
Spatial art, or the art of space.
Which is actually the definition of architecture in Danish. We kind of think this resonates a lot with that term in the sense of it being an installation which is artistic at the same time as being functionalistic.
You're answering all of my questions, Kasper, already. Is architecture art? Can it affect your mood and how you behave? I think that the answer is that we should move on and find out, right?
Yes, let's do that. So maybe we should describe what we see here.
Yeah, what are we seeing here?
I think a lot of people call it a Pantonesque kind of installation.
Yeah.
But
Werner Panton, the great Danish architect. Oh yeah, it's like Der Spiegel's canteen in Hamburg.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. And it's actually not inspired by this. It's inspired by one of the buildings of 3XN, which is the people who designed this whole installation exhibition. And at the end of the room there is a mirror to kind of make it go forever. It makes you actually not quite sure of where the room ends.
And there's no text anywhere to read or distract you?
Well, we have... There is a small introductory text, but generally the whole exhibition until we reach the end is actually without text. We want this to be a shared experience. We want this to be an experience where you are putting words to your sensations. So in that sense, it's the words that comes from our visitors more than the words that we put into their heads.
We should maybe at this point out the architects behind this are 3XN. And each of the rooms reflects one of their buildings, is that right? Or is inspired by one of their buildings?
Yeah, it is. And the room we just exited is inspired from the Children's Hospital here in Copenhagen, which is under construction. So let's go around the corner into this corridor to enter a room.
Wow.
And as you can hear, everything changes. Yeah. You come from a dark corridor into a lit up room.
This is intense.
And it's mirrors all around.
Floor, ceiling, walls, and then a kind of... It's not spiraling, is it? It's all effects of mirrors, or is it spiraling? I'm completely disorientated.
Well, let's walk into it.
All right.
Because it is a circular stairway.
And it's lipstick red. Is that also a staircase above us?
Well, it's a fake staircase to make you even more disoriented.
Right.
And
Kasper, why do you want to make people disorientated?
Because it's a very good way of engaging with your senses, because you feel something and
you want to jolt the public out.
Exactly. It's jolt is like an electric exactly that kind of shock to actually make you aware of what you're experiencing and how you feel about it. There's a lot of people who are actually unable to walk into this room, which is something that I was surprised by, but it kind of gives you an idea of...
It's not really a victory for a curator, is it? Two great rooms of people coming.
But at the same time, we often think, okay, but it's just entertaining version of Tivoli.
Which is the famous old amusement park in the heart of Copenhagen. And the guy, Jesper Konghaus, is that his name?
Yes.
He's the lighting guy, the chief at Tivoli,
yes,
who collaborated with
He also did the lighting on this in this exhibition.
So it is kind of part amusement park, part art installation, part architectural retrospective.
Yes, in the best possible way, I would say, because this amusement park angle is this jolting that you are talking about, which we want to use here in terms of making people contemplate about how they interact with rooms. It's something that we also in amusement park are very used to. There, it's always used for effect. The walkthrough that we just had shows a lot of different effects, both soothing and more shocking, like this room. But it's a way to engage people, to engage with language. And for us, this exhibition is all about getting a language about rooms.
And then over here is a more conventional, finally, you give in and you give us what we expect from an architectural exhibition, which are these absolutely beautiful models, actually, of previous 3XN buildings, the ones that are reflected in the previous rooms.
Actually, all the rooms that we've been through have a corresponding real-life building on this display.
It's very much a 3XN exhibition, and 3XN have buildings all around the world. They're a truly international company. But what makes them and this Danish then?
I would say the meeting of people is at the core of this exhibition. I think it's a way that we have designed buildings and designed public spaces since the modernism movement came to Denmark.
I'm still not sure whether we've nailed the answer to is architecture art.
I would say architecture is artistic. The reason why I say this is because it has an effect, and a lot of the times it wants to give a message, and in that sense it has a lot to do with art. The expression of an architect can be beautiful and can be engaging just as an art piece, but we are not free in the sense of it being a functionalistic endeavor as well. And I think here we kind of merge the two parts. What we do here is kind of take that legacy and give it a modern feel.
For Monocle in Copenhagen, I'm Michael Booth.
If you want to see 3XN's work in person, then visit Aware, which runs at the Danish Architecture Centre in Copenhagen until the 15th of September. Aram is one of the most respected names in British furniture. Established by the late Zeev Aram in 1964, the furniture shop and brand has, over the last 60 years, collaborated with the world's leading creatives and supplied the globe's top architects with outstanding furniture and wares. To celebrate 60 years of family-run business, Aram has launched a new gallery space in the basement of its London flagship. Here, it will hold 2 exhibitions a year, the first of which has just opened. Called Now for Then, it is curated by interior designer and gallerist Max Radford. To find out more about this special showcase and anniversary, Monocle's Tom Webb caught up with Max and Aram's managing director, Daniel Aram. We hear from Daniel first.
Having been established in 1964 by my father in the King's Road, the innovation at that time, I suppose, was that he introduced more or less modern furniture to London. He's an interior designer working on interiors for banks and other commercial kind of outlets, but he didn't like the furniture available at that time within London, and he was very much a modernist, and so he went off and brought the classics in, which hadn't been seen in London before then, which are now well established and everybody knows them, so, sort of Corbusier, Breuer, Castiglione. 60 years later, we are a much bigger outlet, if you like, or a much bigger display, and now in Drury Lane rather than King's Road, but that's what Aram is.
And 60 years later, this is a celebration, surely. How are we celebrating the 60th anniversary?
One thing we did do, which is very nice, was Knoll International. They made a special limited edition Vasily chair for us to celebrate the 60th. The Vasily chair by Breuer is significant in as much as It was the first chair sold in the King's Road by my father, bought by a Vogue photographer called Claude Virgin, who picked it up and wandered down the road with it on his head, more or less. The other reason is that my father felt that the Vasily chair is a particularly important one as a precursor to modern design, and it's still a great chair. So it was one of the chairs that if he would keep a piece of furniture, it was that one. So they did a limited edition for us, reflecting in a special black canvas, which they've never done before, which is surprising.
Well, we turn to Max. What is your relationship now with Aram and the 60th anniversary?
It's been a pleasure to be asked to be involved through my work as an interior designer. The first ever trade account that I ever held was with Aram, so I've been aware of what Aram's been doing for the past 7 years. When we were asked to do it, it was a real honour, to be honest. But then we sort of put that away for a while so we could sort of get on with the exhibition and everything that went in with that, dealing with 10 different designers making new work across a year. Didn't really think about the importance of it until the event last week, where it sort of suddenly struck us how serious it was to be asked to be in the Aram building and how much history that building has, and to be asked to be invited and to help celebrate them was, a real honour. We have works by 10 designers, totalling about 30 pieces. The show's title is Now for Then, which is a reflection of one of Zeeves' quotes, which is like he wanted to show furniture that was correct and right for the time. We've sort of been working with the 10 designers towards that sort of brief, looking at pieces that have a nod towards sustainability and understanding of what making new pieces of furniture means in 2024, but also pieces of furniture that aren't only relevant now but will continue to be timeless. There's a lot of materials that are able to be recycled. There's also new bedding, which is something that people haven't done in a very long time, so we're excited to be showing a new bed by a designer called Jacqueline Pappalardo, reused stone, and including some new lighting as well, which is always difficult to do, so that's impressive to see. There's a stone coffee table within the show. The stone top is an offcut that can't be used for work surfaces or flooring. It's got a big live edge and it's been cleverly machined to receive 4 stainless steel legs. It is called Once a Week, quarried on the land of the Chatsworth estate, so it's the same as lots of the fireplaces within the house. It's an amazing stone. It's filled with lots of the remnants of a lot of little animals and insects, so you can tell the story of time as you look across the table. It's a beautiful thing as well as being a clever reuse of materials.
And Daniel, we mentioned the classics and the timeless pieces that have always been big sellers for you. What are people really turning to at the moment?
I don't think there's any particular thing. In my own mind, we have 3 parts to the way we range. I mean, first of all, we only take in things we like. But apart from that, you've got the classics. You've got what I call commercial, which is maybe more contemporary, maybe a little less iconic, but very good all the same from very good manufacturers. And then you've got the new, which you've no idea if they're going to be successful or not, but are interesting in their own right as designs. People that come to us understand design. They are looking for something that they can find pleasure in, just the fact that they have it in their home. We're not talking about mid-20th century classics necessarily. I mean, classic can be from 20 years ago for some. It's a design that people desire it still because they think it's a great design. Of course, there'll be people who just want a nice sofa that's modular and whatever, and we've got lots of those, and that's great. And then the other side of the business is trade, selling to maybe small hotels or nice little offices and things like that. And their people quite often are looking for the same thing, furniture that is obviously functionally great, but that also they can relate to somehow and they find pleasure in it.
And Daniel, beyond the world of the 60th anniversary, if you can remember any more ways that you're marking it.
Well, the 60th, we've had a few, we've got an event with LDF and Disegno, and there will be something happening in LDF itself, but those details are being finalised. There's also another limited edition little product that we bring out at the end of the year. But that's the sort of 60th. The future, we're just carrying on doing what we're doing. We are a company that doesn't look for huge growth spurts or whatever. We are step by step, and we all enjoy doing what we're doing. So I guess that's how we'll continue.
My thanks to Daniel Aram and Max Radford there. Now for Then runs until the 15th of June 2024 at Aram's flagship in Covent Garden, London. And finally on today's program, I'm joined by our Helsinki correspondent Petri Burtsoff in our studio. Now, Petri, you've reported on the Paimio Sanatorium a number of times. You did an amazing story for us back in 2019 on it, but we want to pick up and I guess continue that narrative. Can you give us a little bit of an overview or tell us a little bit more about what this iconic building is, maybe touching on its cultural and architectural significance, and then we can break into the news?
This is a landmark building. This is one of the sort of textbook examples of functionalist architecture designed by Alvar Aalto and was used as a hospital for a long time. But then the hospital pulled out because this is an old building and has not been properly modernized. So the hospital pulled out and it was up for sale some years ago. Then both the Finnish government and the Finnish Architects Association stepped in because they were afraid that maybe some investor is going to buy it and God knows what they're going to do with it. But they didn't really have a long-term plan. They just wanted to preserve the building. But then...
So they just bought it so that they could own it and at least protect it. And then they were going to work out a strategy.
Yes, exactly. And then fast forward a few years and then this...
And it's sitting vacant this whole time.
It's sitting vacant, yeah. There's not really anything going. They're doing some restoration work, but nothing really happens there. This is a massive building. It's like a hospital building, beautiful in the middle of a forest, but just completely empty. And then this design community of designers takes over, and led by Mirkku Kuhlberg, who's the former CEO of Artek and one of the sort of key influential people in the Finnish design community. So led by her, these designers take over, and they have an actual plan for the sanatorium. They want to turn parts of it into a hotel. They want to use the building. They want to continue Aalto's spirit and Aalto's legacy of understanding the healing power of architecture. Obviously, they're not going to hold patients in there, but they're going to host events. They have already hosted several events with notable speakers. They've attracted some international design talent also to work on the board. They've had exhibitions there. And as I said, the hotels, they have a restaurant there. And they have a future vision for this place. They want to preserve this building by making sure that it's being used.
That's quite... maybe not fascinating, but that almost seems quite obvious. Like most architecture, this was made to have an active use, to have an active life. When Aalto designed it, the whole idea, and I think this goes back to 1933 when the building was built, it's this whole idea of a space that people were coming to heal, to recover. It's just fascinating that all of a sudden buildings certainly can reach the end of a useful life, but looking at the images from this story that you reported in 2019, this is still looking like amazing architecture. It still looks like it's obviously some upkeep needs to be done, but it still looks like it's perfectly fit for some sort of use. But so often I feel like we just shut things down as know that we're looking after that's heritage listed. But really, is there a discussion or is there something to be said about actually using a building as a means of preserving it?
I think you're onto something there, Nick. Especially looking at Aalto, Finland's most famous architect, most of his buildings in Finland are still in use in some way. There's another story I reported from the mill town of Sunila, close to Kotka. This whole sort of factory community, all the residential buildings were designed and built by Aalto. And now people are moving in from Helsinki and living in them. And most of them are still in use, in residential use, even though the factory itself is not active anymore. And then some of Aalto's landmark buildings, Finlandia Hall, for example, in Helsinki, that's a concert venue, a conference venue as well. If you look at Villa Mairea in Noormarkku, his perhaps most famous work, it's not in daily use, but the Ahlström family still uses it for events. Like important visitors stay there and the family uses it. So the point is that, of course, Aalto designed, he's a functionalist architect, he designed buildings to be lived in and used. And I think it's the best way to respect his legacy and his spirit to keep them in use and not just turn them into museums.
Is there discussion around this in Finland? I could be throwing you under the bus here, but are they talking about putting some of his buildings on heritage listings and what, I'm assuming they are, but what that looks like? Because my experience is in the UK and Australia. I've met people, if I go back to Perth, where I'm from, Ivan Ivanov, an amazing mid-century Australian architect, really revolutionised the way that you could use concrete blocks to play with light and colour and shade. People that own his houses are actually campaigning not to have them heritage listed. They will actively go out of their way not to have them heritage listed, not because they want to change what is being done or what has been done or completely overhaul his work, but the fact that if something goes wrong, they need to be able to repair it. And if you have to do it in a certain way with materials that might not exist anymore, all of a sudden it doesn't become possible, and then the house starts to fall into disrepair. So their argument is actually the best way is almost to trust people to respect the architecture and find a way to continue using and inhabiting these spaces. Is that a discussion around Aalto's work in Finland at all? Is it contentious to list it all? How are people falling on this issue?
First of all, I have to say I think most of his work is already heritage listed, so not much of a discussion. But I think also the Finnish Heritage Authority is quite flexible. I know a few people who live not in Aalto buildings, but in other heritage buildings, and they are very helpful in helping to restore these buildings as well. Actually, Actually, another example of Aalto's architecture that comes to mind is the Sugar Cube, the so-called Sugar Cube, former HQ of the Stora Enso paper company. And they're building a new amazing HQ next to it, and it stands abandoned. But then now for the summer, this restaurant is taking over the top floor, and then there are like offices there on other floors as well. So that's also in use.
I guess just bringing it back to Paimio now. So how far along are they in that process in terms of activating and using the space? And I guess what can people expect, or what are the next steps that we might be hoping for?
So a couple of rooms have opened. I know people stayed there last summer. I don't have the exact number now. They might have opened more, but I know they're going to
This
open.
isn't just a plug for you to stay there this summer, is it? We're not being
It is. That's the only thing it is. I grew up like 5 kilometers from that place, and nobody knew about it back then because it was still a hospital. It was off bounds. Anyway, so that's something they're doing there. I think they have plans to upgrade the restaurant they have as well, and then just host more events.
My thanks to Petri Burtsoff there. And that's all for today's show. For more design stories, listen to our 5-minute midweek bonus show, Monocle on Design Extra, which airs on Thursdays. And if you enjoy print, then do pick up a copy of Monocle magazine as well. It's on all good newsstands now. Today's episode was produced and edited by Maylee Evans. I'm Nick Manise, and you can reach me on nm@monocle.com. Thanks for listening.